If you have your message notes, I want to encourage you to pull those out. This is the second week of this Unwrapping Christmas series. And I heard a story this week about a little boy who was writing a Christmas letter. And instead of writing to Santa this year, he decided to write to Jesus. And in the letter, he listed out everything he wanted to get for Christmas. He had this long list of Christmas presents. And so he writes it all out. And then he says, Jesus, I just want to remind you that I have been a really good boy this year. And then he thought to himself, I can't tell a lie. Jesus will know if I'm lying. That's not true at all. So he scribbles it out and he says, well, this year, Jesus, I want you to know that I've been good for at least half of the year. And then he realized that's also not true. And so he scribbled it out and he goes, I've been good for the last month. And he knew that wasn't true. So he scribbled it out. He said, well, Jesus, I've been good for the last couple of days. And then he remembered about getting a fight with his brother and not listening to his mom. And so he was just frustrated. He wadded up the paper, threw it away because he realized that he really hadn't been that good. And so he started thinking about it, like, what do I do? What do I have to say to Jesus to get what I want for Christmas? And about that time, he noticed his family's nativity set in the living room. So he goes over to the nativity set and he takes Mary, the mother of Jesus, out of the set, puts her in his pocket. He goes back to write the letter and he said, Jesus, if you ever want to see your mother again. It takes whatever it takes, right? If you got your message notes out, last week we dealt with one of the most obscure passages in all of the Christmas story, the genealogy. Typically a passage most of us don't really understand, we don't really get. It's a long list of names that don't quite make sense to us until you understand what Matthew is doing and you see that it's filled with the grace of God. It's actually one of the most beautiful and meaningful passages of Christmas when you understand what Matthew is trying to accomplish. So if you missed last week, I highly encourage you to go back and watch it online. Today, we're going to deal with, if you understand what is being said, the most offensive passage in all of the Christmas story. Again, if you understand the depth of what is being communicated here. I titled the message, Peace on Earth, because isn't that what Christmas is all about? Peace on earth. We have it on signs. We have it on Christmas cards. I've seen it in people's yards lit up. Peace on earth. Goodwill towards men. So let's look at this passage today. Luke chapter 2, beginning in verse 10. But the angel said to him, now if you remember the Christmas card we gave you last week, this is the verse that the card comes out of. This is the quotation. Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. And this will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in clothes and lying in a manger. I was in Israel earlier this year, and we were in the Judean hills right outside of Jerusalem. It would have been the area opposite of Bethlehem. But Bethlehem and this area, the architecture would have been identical. And you see the two mangers right in the living room of the home. And all the angel was trying to say, you'll find him lying in a manger, meaning he's been born to a poor family, a family that would have wealthy families would have cribs. Poor families would have mangers in their home and not stables or barn. And so Jesus was born in the living room of an everyday family, and he was placed into a manger. And let me just say, he was not the first baby put in a manger. All the families of that social class would have used mangers for children because they made the perfect crib, and they were already built right into the living room. Verse 13, suddenly a great company of the heavenly hosts appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, and here's the verse, glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests. This is the most famous verse in all of the Christmas story. And the most famous word in the verse is the word peace. And if you understand what Luke is saying here, what the author is writing, what the angel is doing, you would recognize it as one of the most offensive passages to mankind. So what is Christmas all about? It's that phrase, peace on earth. We put it on Christmas cards. It's all over town during the Christmas season. Peace on earth. But the question that I have for you today is, what is that peace? What is this peace that the Christmas story tells us about, that Jesus was born to bring us. What is it? Now, I recognize that many messages during the Christmas season are designed to play on your emotions. We use specific words intentionally because they create evocative feelings in memories. Words like peace and child and gift and goodwill, light, joy. We're trying to stir something inside of you. But I just want to say today, I would rather be clear than eloquent. And this message may be a little difficult for some. As you begin to look at what is this peace that Luke is writing to us about, this peace that Jesus came to bring, it'll make you, for some, very uncomfortable, might even offend you a little bit. Might not be at all what you think it is. And so we want to answer the question, what is this peace on earth? To answer the question, I first need to begin with what it's not. See, you have to see what it's not if you're going to understand what it actually is. So in your message notes, number one, peace on earth is not international peace. It's not political peace. It's not peace between nations. Now look, you can make an argument that Christianity has made the world a far better place. You read the book Dominion by the historian Tom Holland, and he traces the thread of Christianity from the time of Christ all the way till now. And everything you see in our modern world that we value, like women's rights and human rights and dignity and orphanages and hospitals, all have their root in Christianity. So you could argue that Christianity has made the world a better place. Yet others would argue that it hasn't. That religion has created so much war and division in the world that we live in. The reality is, we live in a world full of conflict, full of war. We had Ukraine invaded by Russia. We have Israel invaded. When you look at the last 2,000 years, from the time of Christ to now, the last 100 years, honestly, has been the worst in terms of bloodshed, violence, war, and conflict. So you can make an honest argument, look, Jesus, you and your followers have been around now for 2,000 years, and the world is not a better place from when you were born. I want you to understand today, Jesus was not born to wipe out war. It's not about international peace. That's not what peace on earth means. In fact, if you go to Luke chapter 21, verse 9 and 11, Jesus is talking to the disciples, and they say, what is it going to be like at the end? And here's what he says. When you hear of wars and uprisings, do not be frightened. Don't be surprised. These things must happen, but the end will not come right away. Then he said, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, famines, pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven. What Jesus is saying is the truth is it's going to get worse, not better. Don't be surprised. Don't be caught off guard. I didn't come to bring international peace. Now, let me be clear. This doesn't mean as Christians we should not be peacemakers. There's a whole teaching Jesus does that blessed are the peacemaker. We should seek for peace in any and every situation. We are peacemakers, but the world that we live in is not going to have peace. It's going to get worse. So it's not international peace. Number two, peace on earth is also not internal peace. It's not psychological peace. Many people who've been disappointed that Jesus did not come to end all war said, well, maybe the peace on earth at Christmas is an inner peace. It's an internal equilibrium. It's a psychological, this inner peace, this perfect poise, this inner calm, that when you have Jesus, you'll be able to get along with everyone. You'll just be peaceful as a person, that you'll be able to face whatever the world throws your way. It's not an international peace. It is an internal peace. Well, let's let Jesus answer it. In Luke chapter 12, and let me just say about this verse, this is the only verse in all of the Bible that actually uses the phrase peace on earth. Because if you noticed in the Christmas story, it doesn't say peace on earth, it says on earth peace. Those are different. They're different. This is the only place the phrase peace on earth is actually used. Look at this. Jesus says, this is only 10 chapters later from the Christmas story. Do you think I came to bring peace on earth? There's the Christmas card. There's the message of Christmas. Do you think that I came to bring peace on earth? And he answers it, no, I tell you, but division. Why don't they put that verse on the Christmas card? Like, that's the message of Christmas, isn't it? Do you think I came to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but division. From now on, there will be 5 in one family divided against each other. 3 against 2, 2 against 3. They will be divided. Father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. Now look, unfortunately, there have been many people that have used these passages to go to war in the name of Christ. But this is not talking about nations. This is talking about relational conflict. You cannot go to war in the name of Jesus. I don't care if it's Christian and Muslim or Protestant and Catholic. Jesus does not endorse any of that, nor did he come for that. Those are political wars where people are using his name in vain. And they're over money and economy and natural resources. But without a doubt, Jesus does not endorse any of that at all. What he is saying, though, is a little more troubling. Jesus says, if I come into your life, if you invite me to be Lord of your life, you just need to know up front that I'm going to create some disturbances in your life. It's not always going to be easy. People who you used to get along with, you're not going to get along with anymore. And sometimes it's going to be family. Sometimes it's going to be a father or a brother or a mother or a daughter. People that you used to get along with, they're going to look at what you believe and look at the way you live and look at me being the center of your life, and they're not going to understand it and they're not going to get it, and there's going to be some conflict over me in your life. So please understand, what the angels are saying is peace on earth is not political or international peace, and it's not psychological or internal peace. Now, doesn't the Bible say we do have peace that passes all understanding? Yes, I've felt it. I've experienced it. But even that peace, Jesus says, is temporal. It's relative. It's subjective. It's here. But then we lose it, and we've got to get it back. Why? Because the world that we live in is full of conflict. The world that we live in, Jesus said, you're going to have problems. You're going to have trouble. This peace on earth at Christmas is objective. That's why it says on earth. On earth. It's not subjective. It's not open for interpretation. It either is or isn't. It's concrete. It's now and it's actual. So what is peace on earth? This beautiful Christmas gift that we receive. Luke chapter 1. Zechariah, John the Baptist's father, after John is born and his tongue opens, he prophesies over his son, John the Baptist, who will be the forerunner for Christ. And look what he says. He says, you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High, for you will go on before the Lord and prepare the way for him, to give his people the knowledge of salvation through the forgiveness of their sins. Do you know how powerful that is? That you're going to be saved not because you've earned it. You're going to be saved not because you're good, not because you deserve it, not because you followed all the rules. You're going to be saved simply because you are forgiven of sins. You didn't deserve it, and yet God forgave you because of the tender mercy of our God, by which the rising sun will come to us from heaven. That's the story of Christmas. The rising sun comes out of heaven and is born a child on Christmas Day to shine on those living in darkness and in the shadow of death. That's why we celebrate Christmas with lights. And then here's the key: to guide our feet into the path of peace. To bring our feet into the path of peace. To bring us out of war, out of conflict, into a path of peace. Now I want you to notice earlier in the Christmas message, I said it doesn't say peace on earth, it says on earth peace. So where do we get the phrase peace on earth regards to Christmas? There's an old King James translation that says peace on earth, goodwill to men. But what the King James does is it misinterprets it slightly, because it's not peace on earth, it's on earth peace. And it's on earth peace to people whom God's will, God's goodwill rests upon. Now, what does that mean? That means before God's goodwill came on your life, you had ill will with God. You were at odds with God. Before the goodwill came, There was ill will. So again, what is this peace on earth? It's not between us, relationally, internationally. It's not in us, internally or psychologically. Number 3, peace on earth simply is peace with God. Peace with God. It's peace between God and us, meaning before peace there was war. There was conflict, and now there's peace. Hark the herald angels sing. Glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild. Here's the key. God and sinners reconciled. I want you to understand that this peace with God, is absolute. It's objective. It either is or it isn't, but it's not subjective. And it's a peace that we receive on earth. Now, it can lead to international peace because people with peace with God tend to be peacemakers. It can lead to inner peace because when you have peace with God, you can find peace that passes understanding. But all those pieces are subjective and short-lived. This is concrete. This is objective. Let me explain it. In the world that we live in, you're going to be constantly challenged to lose your peace. You're going to go through conflicts. You're going to have relational issues, issues at work, issues in life, health, finances. But the peace I'm talking about, peace with God, is absolute. Forgiveness is absolute. It is objective, and it is only found in Christ. And this is what makes this so offensive. Now, some of you are thinking to me like, how in the world is that offensive? You're not seeing it. You're not grasping it. You grasp the depths of what it means to have peace with God, and it creates visceral emotions. You either absolutely offended by it to the core, your blood boils, or you are overcome and overwhelmed at the goodness of God. And if there's anything in between, you're not seeing it clearly. You're not looking at it honestly. This objective peace with God is what brings us into the experience of subjective peace. Paul explains it like this. Romans 5, verse 1. Therefore, since we have been justified. What does justified mean? Let me remind you. Justified means God treats you just as if you never sinned. So you have all this evil behavior in your past, all this sin, all the mistakes, the shame, the things that you regret. When you've been justified, God treats you just as if you never did any of it. Just as if you lived your life perfectly. That's what justified means. And it happens by faith, not because you deserve it, not because you've earned it. You'll never be good enough for it. He justifies us by faith. And then here's where he says it. We have peace with God. So we've been justified so that we can have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Peace with God. Verse 10, drop down, he says, while we were God's enemies. So there was a point in your life where you were God's enemy. Before you had peace, you were at war with God. You were an enemy of God. You were fighting. You were in conflict with God. Now you've been justified. Now there is a peace. We were reconciled to him through the death of his son. Reconciled is a math term that means bring the balance to zero. So before you were reconciled, you had this debt. Every sin, every bad, evil deed you've ever committed, you had a debt, and the wages of sin is death. You owed a penalty, a debt for all the bad things you've ever committed, and now you've been reconciled. God has brought your balance to zero. There is no more debt. You've been forgiven. You've been reconciled. You've been justified. You were at war. Now you have peace with God. That's what this means. Peace with God. There's no more war. You've been reconciled. You've been justified. You've been forgiven. Colossians 1, Paul explains it again. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds. In your minds, you were enemies because of your evil behavior. Now here's the offensive part. Most of us here don't want to acknowledge we've ever been evil. Every one of us would say, yeah, we've made mistakes. I've made mistakes. I mean, I've done some bad things. I made mistakes, but I'm not evil. Like, I know what evil is. That's those people in LA. We're in North County. We're not evil. Like, we got out of there because we're not the evil people. So I've done some bad things. I've made mistakes in my life, but I'm not evil. See, this is where Christianity gets offensive. when you begin to recognize that you are so evil, it took the very death of God's Son for you to be saved. That's how evil you are. You're not just a bad person. We were so evil, it took nothing but the death of God's Son to save us. We didn't need improvement, we need salvation. Verse 22, but now we've been reconciled by Christ's physical body. Why was Jesus born a baby, laid in a manger 2,000 years ago? Because he needed a physical body to reconcile us. Through his death, to present us holy in his sight, without blemish, and free from accusation. You see, when you've been reconciled, you're not just forgiven, but God removes all of the stain of your past. There's not even a mark, a fragrance of all of the things you've done. It's all been, there's without blemish, free from accusation, meaning you can never be accused for it again. It's the law of double jeopardy. God would not accuse you for something that Jesus already died on a cross for. That would be an unjust God. He's just because Jesus paid for it so that you will never be accused, free from accusation. Now think about this. This is not relative. This is not subject to degrees. You are either free or you're not free. You can't get any more free than free. In other words, you can't get more perfect or you weren't perfect in the first place. You understand what I'm saying? This is objective. You are either forgiven or not forgiven. You are either perfect in the sight of God or not perfect. You are either free of accusation or you're not. This is an objective reality. Christianity offers you something that the moment you receive God's peace, you are as beautiful today as you will ever be. 1,000,000 years from today, 1,000,000,000 years from today, 1,000,000,000,000 years from today, you will not be any more forgiven than you are right now. You will not be any more beautiful. You will not be any more free from accusation than you are right now. And honestly, anybody who looks at this intellectually, that has actually thought out what this means, realizes that Christianity is unique, different from all other religion. Now, you may hate this. You may even reject it. But until you've allowed it to take your breath away, you don't even understand it well enough to reject it intelligently. Because no other religion offers you peace with God on earth. It's live this way, follow these rules, obey this code, this ethic, and one day you will make peace with God when you pass on to the afterlife. And yet Christianity says, no. I offer you peace here. See, when you understand what peace with God means, it either offends you, makes your blood boil at Christianity, because how can you tell me I'm evil? How can you tell me I'm so bad that I'm at war with God, that I'm an enemy of God? I'm not an enemy. I need God to help live a better life, but I'm not God's enemy. Or you are absolutely overwhelmed at the beauty and the goodness of who God is. So let me ask you the question. When you think about peace with God, does it offend you? Does it make your blood boil? Or does it overwhelm you? Does it bring you to your knees in absolute awe of the goodness of God? Because there's no in between, if you'll look at it honestly. If you'll look at it intelligently, there's no in between. There's no casual, apathetic attitude towards this. It's one or the other. See, here's the problem. The average Christian doesn't understand this. The average Christian in America today doesn't understand what peace with God means. Why? Because most people look at religion, especially Christianity, as trying harder to be good. I'm trying to become a better person. I want to live a better life. I want to be a better husband, a better father. I want to have sleep at night, handle all the weight, responsibilities, and the anxiety of my life. And I'm hoping that I'll be good enough for one day God to favor me. But the truth is, I'm not going to find this perfect peace until I get to heaven. So as long as I'm on earth, I'm always going to be trying, I'm always going to be earning, I'm always going to be working, but I'm never going to be at perfect peace. The gospel offers perfect peace, peace with God, reconciliation, without spot and without blemish. So in closing, let me say there's two groups of people in the room today. There's a group of people who you've never received this peace with God. And you're trying to get inner peace, and you're trying to get peace from conflicts and relationships, but you're trying to do it without going through this. In other words, you're trying to get a subjective level of peace without getting the objective, concrete peace with God first. And then the other group of people in the room today are people that have received the peace of God, but you're not living from it. You're not living out of it. You're not letting it impact every area of your life. You see, when you get the objective level of God's peace, it brings you to the subjective peace that you desire. So let me deal with two things. First off, how do you get peace with God? How do you get it? And then second, how do you live out of this peace? How does it change your life? How does it impact every area of your life? Now, here's the truth. Every single message I ever give, 52 weeks a year, answer these two questions. This is all of Christianity, these two questions. How do you get peace with God? How do you live out of that peace with God? So let me just say a little bit about each as we close. First, how do you get it? How do you get peace with God? Well, the secret is you have to first admit you're at war with God. And that's the problem. You've got to admit you're first an enemy of God. You're at war. You're hostile towards God. See, here's the theory. You can only really receive a gift if you feel like you need it. If you don't feel like you need it, you're really not going to receive it. Like, let's just imagine for a moment I was severely underweight, which is not my problem, but I'm underweight. And you give me a dieting book for Christmas. I'm trying to gain weight, and you give me a dieting book. I'm not going to use it. I'm going to throw it in the back of my room somewhere, and I'm probably never going to open or look at it because I really don't believe I need to receive that gift because I don't believe I need that gift. That's the problem. Most people never receive peace with God because they don't really believe they're at war with God. Look at Romans 8:7. The mind governed by the flesh. So the mind in its natural state is hostile towards God. It's at war with God. It's in conflict with God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. Think about how radical that is right there. Think about what that really means. Most people don't understand that, but feel the implication of it. What this is saying is our primary issue towards God is not ignorance. It's not ignorance. So our main need is not education and information. It's not an apologetics class that's going to bring me into heaven. And our natural condition is not indifference, so it's not motivation that I need. What it's saying here is the natural condition of my mind. My mind on its own is hostile towards God. So my main need is reconciliation. I need peace. I need to be reconciled because my mind on its own is hostile towards God. Now, here's the challenge. When you hear that today, most people kind of have two attitudes towards that thought. They're either like very casual and cool to it, like, I don't know if that's me, or they get really hostile to that idea. The problem is we don't believe we're at war. All of us would say, we need God's help, but I don't know if I need to make peace with God. Like, I've never been at war with God. Like, I'd like God's help. I'd like God's guidance in my life. I'd like to be a better person, but I don't really know if I need peace with God. See, our problem with God is this warfare. We don't see it. Think about being estranged. Ever know a married couple that has gotten estranged? Like they were friends and now they're strangers? If you've ever been around a couple like that, what you realize is what they loved about each other in the beginning, now they look at it through this lens of hostility, and it annoys them about the other. It angers them about the other. So in the beginning of the relationship, she loved the fact that emotionally, you just couldn't shake him up emotionally. He was always calm. He was always cool. He was never flustered. Well, now she looks at that as coldness, emotional coldness. He loved the fact that she was detail-oriented. She thought about all the details and never missed a birthday. It was why she was so good in her accounting career. Now he looks at it as micromanaging and controlling. That's what estrangement does. You begin to see things through hostility. That's what we've done to God. We've become estranged with God, and the very things that make God beautiful, we look at through the lens of hostility, and they now anger us. We look at the infinity of God, the mystery of God. And we look at it as obscurity. I'm not going to believe anything if I can't scientifically prove it. We look at the sovereignty of God. God can do whatever he wants. And we look at it now as unaccountability. He's not doing what I want. We look at the grace of God. It's too cheap and easy. You can't just be forgiven and everything's made right. You got to earn it. You see, you begin to look at all the perfections of God through this lens of hostility and you get angry. I don't understand why God does what He does. How could he let this happen in my life? If he's so great, he's so sovereign, why is he allowing this happen? I see it as unaccountability to me. I can't believe in a God who would allow terrible things to happen on earth. Yet, think about Christmas. Think about Christmas. At Christmas, we have a God who comes into the world and allowed the most terrible things to happen to him. And instead of looking at his pain, instead of looking at the fact that he hated pain and suffering so bad that he had to do something about it, he came into our world, he became part of the pain and suffering so that he could save us from it. Instead of seeing that, we just look at our pain and say, why can't God do exactly what I want him to do? We can't reconcile that his wisdom may be greater than our wisdom. He can see things we can't see. We got to be careful. We live in a generation that's all about my truth, how I feel. And what we're doing is we're despising him by looking at him and saying, I don't trust his infinite wisdom to really believe that he could be doing things that are beyond my wisdom. All I see is him doing things wrong. He's not doing it the way I want. He's too holy for me. He's too loving for me. His sovereignty, his grace. And I know right now some of you are thinking, okay, Pastor, you're stretching it. I've never been an enemy of God. I've never hated God. Like I remember before being a Christian, I didn't hate God. Like I didn't know him, didn't understand him all that well, but I didn't hate him. I wasn't an enemy. Of course I didn't hate him. There's no of course. If you ever meet the real God, there's no of course about it. There's nothing casual about it. Look at Scripture. Anytime they came into the presence of God, they are either terrified of him or they were absolutely overwhelmed by his beauty and his goodness. There was no casual. There was no in between. See, what's happening is we're creating God in our image. We're not looking at the God of the Bible. We're not looking at him for who he is. When you say, well, I've never been enemies of God, you're not talking about the God of the Bible. You're talking about the God that you've made him to be. You've created a God in your image. You've created a God that fits your paradigm. Madalyn Murray O'Hair, the famous atheist, was debating somebody on a talk show years ago. And she was destroying this guy because she was such a brilliant, brilliant woman. And the talk show host was flustered because he's losing the debate and he wants to win the argument. It was all about whether or not there was a God. And so the talk show host pulled the old trick out of his hat, looked at the studio audience and said, how many of you believe in God? And everyone raised their hand, and he looked at that as his proof for winning the argument. Now, if Madalyn Murray O'Hara would have thought about it in that moment, what she could have done is stop the show right there and say, whoa, wait a second. Let me ask you a different question. Not, do you believe in God? Let me ask you this question. Do you believe in the God of the Bible? Do you believe in a God that is extremely holy? A God that at Mount Sinai said, if you touch the foot of the mountain, you'll be dead. A God that when Uzzah reached up to steady the ark, he was struck dead by the holiness and presence of God. A God that said to Job, I'm not going to explain to you why all these terrible things are happening in your life. You just need to accept it because of who I am and because of who you are. How many of you believe in that God, the God of the Bible? Here's the truth. People hate the God of the Bible. We don't want a God of extreme mercy where you have to be saved by grace alone. We don't want a God of extreme holiness where he says, I will by no means forgive the evil and the injustice in the world, but it will be punished. We don't want the real God of the Bible. We want this mamby-pamsy, sissy, middle ground, whatever God that we create in our image that fits what we like. If you're ever going to find peace with God, you have to first acknowledge you are at war with God. It's the hardest thing for us to do. The gospel says Jesus lived the life that we should have lived, and he died the death we should have died. Isaiah says he was punished for our peace. Now let me speak to the other group quickly. Those of you that have peace with God, but aren't living out of it. Those of you that would say, I believe this. I believe everything you're saying, Pastor. Well, let me ask you the question. Then is your life as remarkable as it should be? If you believe this, is your life as remarkable as it should be? Are you walking in the faith and the victory and the authority and the power that is available to people who truly live out of the peace with God? I had to ask myself this question this week, and I didn't like the answer. And so my encouragement to you is this Christmas, let's ask ourselves the question, is this the wonder of my life? Am I amazed at this concept, peace with God? Does it floor me? Does it bring me to my knees in overwhelming joy of who God is? There's an amazing phrase in 1 Peter 1, verse 12. Peter's talking about the gospel being preached, and then at the very end of the verse, it says something that most people miss, and I want you to see this today. Peter says, even angels long to look in these things. Even angels desire, long to look into this gospel, this peace with God, this reconciliation. Do you realize angels are smarter than us? Angels have been around longer than us. They're wiser than us. They're greater than us. They are majestic, glorious beings that God created, and it says they never tire. They are relentless. They have this consuming desire to look into this gospel. Can you imagine it from their perspective? They see it clearly. They see the majesty of this loving, amazing Father. They see His holiness. They see His incredible power and greatness. And they see His love and mercy. And they see these creatures on earth, these humans, who rejected Him and spit on Him and killed Him and have been at war with Him and turned their back on Him, who don't deserve it at all. And they watch this loving God send His Son down to earth to pay for their sins so that they can be reconciled. And the angels sit back and they are amazed, and they never get tired of looking in this. They never get bored. It takes their breath away. These beings so much wiser than us, they can't comprehend the depth of how this amazing God, as big and mighty as He is, could do this for these creatures who don't deserve it. Every problem you and I face is because we have gotten over it. Every problem. The reason we have problems forgiving people is because we've gotten over what peace with God means. The reason we deal with stress and anxiety is because we've gotten over what peace with God means. If you could look deeply into this peace with God this Christmas, can you imagine what it could do in your life? Nothing in this world would shake you. Health crisis, financial crisis, family drama, work problems. Look, the God of the universe made peace with me. I'm forgiven. I've been reconciled. I'm free from accusation. I'm without blemish. You look deeply into that, this peace with God, everything else you're looking for flows out of that. You want inner peace? It flows out of peace with God. You want peace with people around you? It flows out of peace with God.